Let's take time out and go over how to hire, train, and manage associate doctors. And this is one of the most exciting aspects of being a chiropractor. And you're going to see why by the time we finish this. But bottom line is when you know how to hire, train, and manage associate doctors, it does two very significant things directly. Number one, it's the simplest way, and I'm going to show you the exact path. It's the simplest way to create wealth for a chiropractor. I'm going to show you that. It's leverage, leverage, leverage. And so I'm going to show you exactly how that works. Um, Simplest way to create wealth. And remember, as a chiropractor, only 1% of millionaires become millionaires exchanging time for money. In other words, being a chiropractor, a dentist, a doctor, a lawyer. So if you don't know how to invest in anything else, chances are you're going to be working the rest of your life. And then number two, it creates freedom. That does a lot of things. When you have associate doctors and you have the freedom, when I had associate doctors, I would come in at 10:30 and I would do some training. I'd leave at like 3:30, 4 o'clock. I'd take off whenever I wanted to, if I wanted an extended vacation or if I wanted to go 10 days into Europe or whatever I wanted to do. I got doctors that they'll still start teaching. They'll leave the office at 4 o'clock. The office stays open regular hours. They'll leave the office at 4 o'clock and attend their kids' basketball games, football games, all that stuff. So your quality of life skyrockets. I say it all the time. When you learn how to hire, train, and manage associate doctors, that is like the best time. You don't have burnout because you don't have to be there full time. So you can start working part-time. You can start taking off early. You can come in later. It gives a lot of flexibility, So, and it definitely stops burnout. Like I said, I had one doctor who, he pretty much took a year off almost. And he worked one day a week and pretty much he was the assistant coach to his kids' basketball team, their baseball team, and he joked with me, he goes, man, I won father of the year that year. Another doctor, like what I did when I took time off, I took that extra time to open offices. So to make more money, that's what I did. And I got another client doing that right now. He's taking time off. And he kind of mixes it up. He spends time with his kids. He's got young kids. So he can get home and participate in his kids' activities. And he's opening multiple offices too with the time that he has. So remember, the worst money you can make is exchanging time for money. It's the worst money you can make. Why? You got limited time. And when you do make that, and so you got only a certain amount of money you can make because you got limited time, and it's taxed at the highest rate. So when you exchange time for money, in other words, practicing, it's the absolute worst money you'll make. And then of course it gets better when you start leveraging it. So, but the key that we're going to show you is how to hire, train, and manage associate doctors. Not only does it create freedom to give you the flexibility to where you don't even have to practice anymore. Like in my case, I practiced 7 years full-time, 2 years part-time, 9 years total, and never practiced again. I never had to practice again. I actually was able to retire at age 33. And then I went out and retired at, I stopped working for the first week, and I'm sitting out on my boat and I'm like, oh, this is great. And then they find out real quickly, nobody your age can do anything, and gets boring pretty fast. And so you realize you're like, well, you got to do something. So, to be able to work part-time, to do what you love to do and have the freedom to do what you want to do with your family or hobbies or vacation or travel, whatever, is fantastic. So I cannot, the end game, and most doctors don't even think of it when they get in practice, that, they just became a chiropractor to practice. And then after like 10 years, they start getting wore out. They're like, is this, I'm stuck in my office, and as you know, most chiropractors don't take very much time off for vacations at all. I didn't take a week off for 2 years. I worked every weekend for 2 years. I didn't take a week off for 2 years. I got a friend that didn't take a week off for like 5 years because you're afraid to lose, you're afraid to not only the money you'll lose by not being in your practice, but you're afraid of your practice going down. So it's a bad situation when you're in your office by yourself. It'll wear you out. It'll drag you down is what'll happen. And one of the side benefits is the professional relationship. You can't talk to a CA like you can another chiropractor. It's a totally different conversation. It's a totally different level of conversation. So, and it's lonely out there. If you know this, if you've been practicing on your own, if you don't have another friend or a mentor or coach or something like that, it is lonely out there. You're out there on your own. So it's just great. I loved it when I had my associate doctors. We got along. It was camaraderie. It was professionalism. I loved it. It was just a great experience all the way around. And of course, you have to create that. It doesn't happen by itself. Like anything, you got to know how to do it. So that's what this is about, how to hire, train, and manage associate doctors. But I'll just share with you right now why it's the path to wealth. It's the easiest, least expensive way to wealth the fastest. And here's why. And you're going to see. But the bottom line is when you bring on an associate doctor, it doesn't cost you $80,000, $100,000, $50,000. It doesn't, and that's what a lot of doctors think. They go, I can't afford an associate doctor. Well, that's not what it costs. It only costs the amount of money that you initially pay in salary to break even. So, if you're paying a base salary of $2,500, that's 13 visits a week at $50 a visit. If you start with a base salary of $5,000, that's only 20 visits a week. Well, it's unbelievably easy for our doctors in our system to see, 20 visits a week at the end of like 30 days, definitely 60 days. So, you're breaking even within 2 months, no more than 3 months. So an associate doctor in real money only costs about $6,000 to $9,000. And then you go, well, what kind of return can you get? Well, that depends on your dom. I'll actually show you the numbers and how that works. But it can range anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000 per associate doctor, depending on your dollar per visit. And you go, well, where else can you get that kind of an investment? Where else can you spend $9,000 and make $200,000 a year or $100,000 a year? I call them like mini ATM machines. Those are like retirement accounts. And by the way, if you're older and you've lost money through divorce or something like that, and now you're too tired and worn out to build your practice and make a lot of money because you're like in your 50s and 60s, this is your way out. This is your ticket to high income and freedom. And that's what that's the way you want to just ride into the sunset. Do what you love to do. Do it part-time as much as you want to do it, and vacation as much time as you want to do. That's a fantastic lifestyle, high quality of life. So we'll go into the details of the wealth, but the bottom line is for you to make $100,000 in the stock market, passive income, you'd have had to probably make around $16 million in your practice at 50% overhead to have 8 million, at 50% in taxes to have 4 million, at a 2-3% interest rate to make a passive $100,000 a year. Well, it only takes $6,000 to $9,000 to do that with an associate doctor to make $100,000 a year. See, and it gets better than that when you learn how to take that money. So now you take that $100,000 and now you know how to leverage it up 3 to 1, 5 to 1, 10 to 1 in the real estate. Remember, 70% of the millionaires became millionaires through real estate, not by being a doctor, a lawyer, an optometrist, a chiropractor. You don't have much of a chance in hell of having a net. You got a 99% or less chance of having a net worth of $1 million if you don't invest in stocks or bonds or real estate. You got less than a 30% chance of having a net worth of $1 million if you do not invest in real estate. And that's exactly what I did. That's how my net worth went over $1 million when I was 32 years old. It wasn't chiropractic. It was from being successful in chiropractic, knowing the systems to bring on the associate doctors to create extra money that I leveraged into real estate. See, that's the formula. So that's how you can take $6,000 or $9,000 as an example. The less you know in real estate, like let's say you got to put 30% down. Okay, you can only buy 4 rental properties with the present laws if you don't know real estate. Okay, especially if you don't know owner financing. And then our commercial property is 30%. So that inhibits a lot of people from just buying their own building. So they'll go 20 years with paying rent. All that money's wasted. That could be $250,000, $500,000 20 years later that's in your pocket. So that's why the first thing you do is make sure you buy your home, because it's forced discipline. You got to pay your mortgage. Well, it might as well go into your pocket instead of rent. The second one is to buy your office as fast as you can. So you're spending the money anyway. So it goes into your bank account, and then just start leveraging it off into regular real estate. And even if it's only 3 to 1, let's say you have to put 30% down. Well, $100,000 now turns into $300,000. See? And the better you are, and the more, and you can be ignorant and do that. You can like not know very much about real estate and do that. And of course, the more you know, the higher the leverage. So if you know a little bit more, you can leverage it 5 to 1. So you can take $100,000 and buy a $500,000 cash flowing asset, see? Quality asset. So that $500,000 came from $9,000. And if you know somewhat decent, we typically easily buy 10 to 1. So you take that $100,000 and it goes into $1 million in real estate, see? So that $9,000 created $1 million. That's the leverage. So the sweet spot of chiropractic is not practicing. The sweet spot of chiropractic is knowing how to hire, train, and manage associate doctors, working part-time, or if you don't want to, don't work at all. And that's usually what happens when my doctors start learning how to, all the systems to maximize the profitability. They hire the first associate doctor, the second, and real quickly they decide, I don't want to practice full-time. And most of them don't. They usually practice like 1 day a week, and then they just manage. And then they build their businesses. They start buying real estate, or they start opening more offices or things like that. That's usually what happens when the guys that actually stick with it and follow the steps of our program. That's what happens. And that's exactly what I did. That's how I was able to retire at age 30, 33 roughly. Okay, so that's what we're going to go into right now. So of course we cover the basics. We cover, in our consulting, we cover all the basics of running a practice, new patient retention, fees, overhead, how to hire, train, manage staff, office flow, layout, all the components relative to running a practice to maximize your profitability. So we cover that, and we're actually going to touch on that a little bit here. And you need to know how to do that first. You can't jump past that, or you kind of fall on your face. And then once you do that, you take the next step, learn how to hire, train, and manage associate doctors. And that's when quality of life skyrockets. It gets easier. It's fun. There's not as much stress. I had the less stress on me when I had associate doctors. I didn't have to be there, and I had real estate making me money. That was the less stress I had, and I could do what I wanted to. If I wanted to go to Europe for 2 weeks, I did. See, that's the ultimate. Not I need to practice and make a lot of money. And the bad news is when you're in office by yourself, the bad news is doctors spend all the money they make. That's the bad news. They don't typically take X amount of money and start investing it and leveraging it up. They buy the big house, the big car, the taxable, non-depreciating liabilities with monthly payments. That's why doctors stay broke with high incomes. So that's the bad news about that. But when you actually work part-time, you should be able to just live off that income. And then your associate doctor's income, you just take that income and that goes into your investments. So you work part-time, you got freedom, you got a good income, got a good house, got a good neighborhood, kids are going to private schools, you take vacations when you want, all that. But the most important part is you're creating security for your family because you're creating wealth. Practicing does not create security for your family. Practicing does not. You got to go back into that office Monday morning. Security for your family, it helps when you have associate doctors. That definitely helps, especially if you have an injury. And that's when the light bulb really goes off with the doctors, is when they have an injury. They're like, oh my God, I got to have a backup here. Yeah, you better have a backup. And most doctors wait too long before they get that backup. Now they're in trouble. So, but it creates a lot of security when you have another source of income, another doctor there to support it. And then you start picking up a couple pieces of real estate that are cash flowing. It's like, you don't even care that they cut the UCRs for insurance payments again. You don't even care, because that's not what's going to create security for you and your family. See, and that's what it was me. I didn't care. All my other friends that were chiropractors that had no associate doctors and no investings. I mean, they were screaming every time, every year the insurance is cut, cut, cut. And they're screaming, wow, bloody murder. I didn't care anymore. I didn't care. It didn't matter because I didn't have my fishing. I didn't have just one fishing pole in one pond. See, there you go. So that's what we're getting into. It's pretty darn exciting is what it is when you learn how to do it. So that's what we're going to cover right now. So let's go ahead and get started into how to hire, train, and manage associate doctors.